Good evening, and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Commonwealth Club of California, a place where you're in the know. You can find us online at commonwealthclub.org, on Facebook and Twitter, and our YouTube channel. I'm Joseph Fink, the President Emeritus of Dominican University in Marin County, and the former chair of the board of the Commonwealth Club. More importantly, I'm the moderator for you this evening. It's now my pleasure to introduce our distinguished speaker, Willie Brown, the former mayor of San Francisco and a noted political commentator who is here to give his annual talk on the state of national and regional politics. It's too bad he doesn't have much to talk about. As most of you know, Willie Brown served as a two-term mayor of San Francisco and Speaker of the California State Assembly, and is widely regarded as one of those influential African-American politicians that we've ever seen in this country. He has been at the center of California politics, government, and civic life for 5 decades. He's worked with every governor from Pat Brown to Jerry Brown twice. Today, he heads the Willie L. Brown Jr. Institute on Politics and Public Service and writes a column for the San Francisco Chronicle. Please join me in welcoming Willie Brown.
You know, you're right, Joe. It has been my showing up for the Commonwealth Club since I left the mayor's office.
That's right.
Years ago.
That's right.
You are correct. I do a column for the Chronicle, and I hope all of you keep reading it. Yes. They pay me to write it. It's based on content, not so much of the column, but on your content and whether or not you read it. Some people tell me that I only buy the Chronicle for your column. I love to hear that. I love to know the Chronicle hear that because it keeps me. When I first accepted the challenge to do a column for the Chronicle, I had trepidations, and it was, the first column was July 1st, 2008, just 2 or 3 months ahead of Barack Obama's elevation to the presidency. And so it was almost kind of natural to be doing that, and I figured within 2 or 3 months after he has been sworn in, it would all be over. So I looked for a career of 6 months as columnist, and I am now just 2 months short of 10 years writing and so far, the paper has not been sued. I have not been sued. I have not been called fake. Matter of fact, on a couple of occasions, when somebody raised the question about whether or not the content of the column was on a fact-check basis accurate, I said, you don't understand. I write a column. I'm not a reporter. I don't have to be accurate. I can be totally and completely creative on every story that I might wish. And as long as I make sure you understand, it's my spin. Unfortunately, there's a president who has that same attitude about public policy. And it's created a problem here, a major problem here in America, if not the world. Things obviously have altered themselves substantially since the swearing in of Donald Trump as the president of these United States. It was a tough day in 2016, January, when he took the oath of office. For some people, it was an even tougher time going back to when he first sought the job in May or June of 2000, I think it must have been 14, 15, when he said, I'm running for this job. And the Republicans all snickered because they had a whole host of, they said, great Republican candidates, and it ended up being 10 or 12 people on the stage during the course of those debates. And slowly but surely, it looked like an elimination derby. After each one of those presentations, there would be somebody missing from the next one. And it was because Trump had chosen to take them one at a time. He'd take the strongest each time, and using his bizarre behavior, his total absence of any foundation in facts or any mutual respect or a sense of history. He simply made it up, and each of them tried to challenge it, and when they did, they found themselves on the short end. He was tapping in to an unrest in America that still exists today. He tapped into it religiously without offering any explanation of what he would do for it, except be its spokesperson, be its megaphone, be extend an opportunity for people through him to do whatever protesting they wished to do. And he was fairly irresponsible. He literally eliminated each one of his opponents by the process of humiliation. All of them was sticking to facts, all of them was sticking to intellectual brigades and intellectual involvement, and Trump was doing none of the above. He was going totally outside of the realm of reality and making people really believe. And when my column said early on in 2015 that Trump would win the nomination, I was, of course, people raised questions about my sanity. They wondered, how could you conclude that Trump could win on the Republican nomination? I said, I have been around long enough, I've met enough Republican voters to know that he tends to speak directly to where they are in their decision-making process and how right I was. He won the nomination. And then the reality began to set in for many people, including me, that there was a distinct possibility that he could actually win the whole thing. Of course, Hillary never believed that. Democrats across the nation never believed that. And they did not treat it as if it was an election that had to be a holy grail kind of pursuit. It was just amazing how we didn't do our work in Michigan, how we didn't do our work in Pennsylvania, how we didn't do our work in several states that Hillary should have won. Hillary didn't go there often enough, or the ground game was not good enough, and Trump was just increasing in every aspect of his antics and in every aspect of what he was about and was about. He was making things so simple that even the most unusual person who paid no attention to politics at all was suddenly engaged. Make America Great Again and all the other antics that he went through and the slogans and people grabbing onto them. And suddenly you've got a competitive candidate who was totally devoid of any real program or any real policy, but just simply public utterances. And in many cases, utterances that, if in fact believed in, would demonstrate the ultimate in irresponsibility. Trump did that. He did it directly and effectively, and it ended up when the dust cleared. He did not believe that he could win. He did not intend, frankly, to be, and he wasn't prepared to announce that he had won. He was really prepared to announce that the election had been stolen from him. And his posture in New York was exactly that. On the other hand, Hillary had every gadget of celebration there is. And from the time that people won school board elections, or special district elections, or city council elections, or supervisorial elections, or mayor's elections, or state legislative elections, or congressional elections, or U.S. Senate elections. She had every component of the celebration that goes into all of that, and she had us all there. And unfortunately, it wasn't a situation like you have some places where you can lease out. If you don't need it today, you can lease it out, kind of Airbnb. We should have had that available, so Trump could have used it for celebration purposes, because his was just terrible. He wasn't, as usual, he wasn't really prepared. He won, and literally in the winning, proceeded to question whether or not the votes had been counted accurately. Because he was sure he could not win. And he's still pretty much of that opinion. He doesn't want the votes really checked because you may find out that some of those mistakes endure to the benefit of Hillary, not to the benefit of Trump. But nevertheless, he's there. And he's there with the kind of turmoil still a part of what he is about, as was the case in the election itself. And that's why there's nobody that can work for him longer than, they need a union collection of people in order for when the terminations occur. I'm waiting for the lawsuits for wrongful termination or retribution termination, all the other kinds of things you can do in the world of employment. You may get that in the Trump world. But, of course, the Trump world may come to an end much sooner than most people would have anticipated. It could come to an end because if, in fact, there is evidence collected from the people who are doing all of the investigations, and that evidence points to the fact that Trump has been, in fact, guilty of something, either before the election started, or during the election, or post the election, or post the management of government under his jurisdiction since January of 2016. Somewhere in that collection of activities, there may very well be sufficient amount of data, sufficient amount of information that may cause Trump to want to leave. Do I think that will happen? No, I do not think that will happen. I really have begun to prepare our folk for 8 years of this bizarre behavior. And I said that advisedly because as I look over the terrain, there does not appear to be any real place where Trump, and no method by which Trump could be deposed. It is absolutely amazing how he has become the Republican Party. As a matter of fact, he has replaced the Republican Party. It is now the Trump Party. It is not the Republican Party, as we've noted. It is not the Republican Party of Lincoln. It's not the Republican Party of Rockefeller. It's not the Republican Party of Goody Knight from the state of California. It's not the Republican Party that anybody in this country has ever seen or heard of. It's a whole different operation. And Trump is the architect. Trump is the person who is moving it and operating it. And unfortunately, on the Democratic side of the aisle, we don't really have a candidate capable of challenging Trump. You go through the laundry list of names that have been called. In many cases, they're not yet quite ready. Not quite ready. Great potential for a number of our younger U.S. senators. Great potential for 2 or 3 of the governors that we have in this nation on the Democratic side of the aisle. But at this moment, there's not one of them that's ready, and probably won't be ready by 2020, which is just 2 years from now. That process is going to start in 2019. That's going to be really tough to get any of those people up to speed and to get us involved. So unless we find a phenom like we had in the body of Barack Obama, we're going to be in trouble trying to challenge this man, because he still has 40% of this nation on a disciplined basis, following every step of the way. Just maybe one of the new people who are interested in politics, 18, 19-year-olds about to graduate from high school, entering college, with the purity that comes and the clarity that comes, and with none of them burdened with any of the yesterday activities. There may be somebody among them that will be able to marshal all of their support behind one of the qualified persons on the Democratic side of the aisle and build into that effort a movement that could produce a competitor for Donald Trump. At this moment, that competitor does not exist. However, there is a movement afoot to try to get the Congress and the U.S. Senate back in the hands of Democrats. And the optimism surrounds that, and it's not misplaced optimism. The optimism surrounding the potential for Nancy Pelosi becoming Speaker again is really very good. The state of California has several seats that are at risk, and in this state, not one of the Republicans seeking re-election is embracing Donald Trump. They don't want him here. They don't want anybody to know that they know him. They don't want anybody to know that they're the same stripe or the same party. On the other hand, on the governor's race in this state, there is a young man who's actually running as if he is Trump. There's a fellow named Travis Allen who's running. And in my opinion, he represents the greatest threat to the candidacy of Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom is a candidate in the state of California who is leading in the polls, has continuously led in the polls, and is beginning to improve in terms of the numbers. And his opposition is beginning to become clear. Suddenly, there are two Republicans who are second and third. And if those two Republicans get themselves together, the combination of their numbers will elevate them into a position where one of them will be in the runoff. And the one that Newsom certainly doesn't want in the runoff for the fall is a fellow named Travis Allen, who's a member of the California State Legislature, and he is literally very flippant, very conversant with reaching out and touching audiences, very conversant with moving people to be responsive, somewhat akin to how Trump was when he ran against Hillary Clinton. That person presents a real threat. At some point, the Republicans in this state, being the practical people that they are, may very well say to Mr. Cox from San Diego, it's not your turn, it's Allen's turn. And if they do, we do have a race going on in the state. I still think Newsom will win. Newsom wins, and the several districts that we're looking at that Nancy Pelosi needs, it'll come about if we replicate that in multiple states throughout the nation as a distinct possibility that in fact the House that Nancy presides over may very well be returned to the Democratic side. But it means a required net gain of about 26 or 27 seats for that purpose. And believe me, the states have been designated where those seats might be. And because of the success that we've had in several places in the interim in the special elections, and because of the clear absence of what's happening on the Republican side of the aisle, even in states like Arizona, we may very well be in a position where Nancy Pelosi wins. On the other hand, Schumer in the Senate is a little more challenged. We don't have exactly the same level of optimism. We have too many Democratic senators who have to seek re-election versus Republicans this time around, and we have too many who are in districts and places where Trump won by 42 points against Hillary Clinton, and where there is not the same kind of movement as there was in the flawed candidacy of their opponents. And so far, we have relied upon not only our thrust and our movement, Trump's conduct at the national level and at the international level, but we've also relied upon the flawed selection of little Trumpites. In many cases, we are fortunate because Trump can't be replicated easily. Only with Travis Allen and one or two persons like him is there really a Trump type. If there were Trump types all over the nation, Democrats would really be in trouble. But fortunately, there are people like the guy in Alabama. Those are the kind of candidates that the Republicans are really pushing, and we're urging them to push those candidates. But they do reflect appropriately who Trump is, and if that happens, Schumer may very well end up leading the Senate, as it's being led by McConnell currently, as Nancy, I think, will ultimately lead the House. The difference, however, is that on the Democratic side of the aisle, we are seeking re-elections in all those places. The Republicans, however, are running for the hills. Wonderful, decent Republicans are trying to find something else to do, including the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, is leaving. Those are all great indications that, in fact, they're not as solid as they need to be in this kind of a contest, and we may very well have a new movement afoot, particularly if the young people step up and start doing what I think they need to do beyond the great demonstrations and the great protests that is going on in this country surrounding the old issue of guns and all aspects of what the NRA has been doing to people. And then you come to the candidacy on the local level. San Francisco is in a mayor's race. There is a mayor's race. Some people have trouble knowing about that, because it's not exactly, you know, it's kind of dull in the sense. And it only happened, however, because Ed Lee, our mayor, had a heart attack. Ordinarily, the race for mayor in San Francisco would happen 2019. People would just now begin to talk about who would replace Ed Lee. But last December 12th, Ed Lee had a heart attack. He died at a grocery store out near his home in the late evening. They were unable to save him, and the results were that quickly people start thinking, who can be the mayor? In San Francisco, we've had, in my time period, the same situation 3 times. First time we had it was when George Moscone and Harvey Milk were assassinated, Moscone being mayor, and Dianne Feinstein's career turned around. She was on her way out the door. She had lost the mayor's job a couple of times, and she was pretty much ready to leave and probably go teach or do some other things. But the assassination elevated her instantly. She was the acting mayor because of the presidency of the Board of Supervisors. Her colleagues, led primarily by Bob Mendelsohn, orchestrated the process by which she became the interim mayor. Under our charter, obviously, we're in a position, and the ordinance says very clearly, you are the acting mayor, since there is no vice mayor directly elected in the city, and within a framed period of time, you can become the interim mayor. With 6 votes of your fellow members, none of those 6, not one of those 6 votes can be yours. So Dianne Feinstein became the mayor, and she went on to serve 2 full terms. Gavin Newsom got elected mayor in 2004, January 8th, 2004, and then of course, Mr. Newsom is always potentially a candidate for a higher office. He's just that skilled, and he has just that ability, and he also has that imagination. And he looked at the possibility of running for governor early on. Some of us talked him out of that. We said Jerry Brown could beat you. When Arnold was going out the door, he seriously thought about running for governor. At the last minute, he announced for lieutenant governor, and he defeated the lady who was running and should have won. And he became the lieutenant governor, and he instantly focused on the next opportunity. And that would be when Jerry Brown leaves again. Jerry Brown's been here and back and here and back. Jerry Brown ran for president, I think, 5 times, and he didn't win either one of those. Jerry Brown, it's a career job for Jerry to run for public office. He first ran for the Community College Board in Los Angeles and won in that county, and then he ran for Secretary of State, and he won, had some trouble in pursuit thereof because he wanted to run as Jerry Brown, and his father had been governor, was Edmund G. Brown, and no one knew who the hell Jerry Brown was, but everybody knew the brand Edmund G. Brown. He finally came to the conclusion, and he won Secretary of State, and then he decided to run for governor. And at a very early age, it was a walk in the park. He ran against 3 or 4 people, including Joe Alioto, then the mayor of San Francisco. He ran against George Moscone, who was a state senator. He ran against Jerry Walde, who was a congressman. Just a whole host of folk running. And Jerry Brown won the governorship. And then he won 2nd term as governor. He, in the process of winning the governorship, however, he suddenly started running for president, like apparently all governors do. They all seem to have the disease and they want to run for president almost overnight. So Jerry won the governorship in '74, and he promptly ran in '76 for the presidency. But being Jerry, he didn't decide to run for president until 2/3 of the votes had already been counted. And he ran a little late, and it was tough. to try to make up, one-third, two-thirds. And he didn't win, and he kept doing that. In 1980, he did the same thing. When Ted Kennedy was thinking about running, he did the same thing. Jimmy Carter got him in 1976, and Jimmy Carter's running for re-election in 80. I mean, it's just all kinds of maturity, and knowing the brand, he really did well. 82, he left, decided to become an independent, decided to go over to China and hang out with Mother Teresa for a while. And he did that and got his soul cleansed and went and moved to Oakland, opened a warehouse, living quarters over there, and looked at that as a possible place, and suddenly decided to run for mayor over in Oakland. And he won the mayorship in Oakland. And then while holding the mayorship, he realized that his father had also been the attorney general, and he had yet been the attorney general. So he ran for the attorney generalship in order to make sure that on his resume that would be in fact listed. So consistently, and I'm telling you all this because don't be surprised. In 2020, Jerry may very well run for president again. Who knows? And in that regard, he may very well end up being the best candidate that we could have. Because after all, he's a little older now, but only by age, not by work ethic. He has not, he has not been that troubled, and he has not had that kind of stress, in spite of all the wonderful jobs that he's had, including winning the job that his father had as Attorney General, and then running for governor and winning it again and getting 2 more terms. So he's had a great career. And that put Newsom in a position where he had to just wait patiently. And wait patiently he did. And the opportunity presented itself. It would have been 2018 when he would have been running. But lo and behold, Barbara Boxer decided to bail out, and that meant there would be an opportunity for the U.S. Senate early on. Well, it just so happened that there were 3 people represented by the same political consultant, a fellow named A. Smith, and it was Villaraigosa, Gavin Newsom, and Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris was the Attorney General. Villaraigosa had been the mayor of Los Angeles, retired, and Newsom was the lieutenant governor. The same firm represented all 3 of these people. Barbara announced, and somehow, magically, Newsom announced that he was going to hang around and run for governor. 2 minutes after she announced, that's what he announced. So he obviously had a connection with the Russians, and he got to than anyone else. And Antonio got the word, and he said, well, I got to think about it. And Kamala Harris got the word, took one look, and noticed Newsom had already left the fray. She immediately announced that she was going to run for the U.S. Senate, and she also knew that she could bail out. If she didn't want to run, she could leave. She still had a job. And so lo and behold, somehow that political consultant firm settled on Newsom for governor and Ms. Harris for U.S. Senate, and dealt out in that process of exit was Antonio Villaraigosa, to surface again as a candidate for governor for the state against Newsom. And his man who's running his operation is the guy that participated in running my operation here in San Francisco for the job that I sought when I sought it back in 1996. So it's kind of an interesting set of musical chairs with the most talented people having a good time participating in that process. I think, however, that Newsom will and can win the governorship, but it will be an interesting race if his opponent is Travis Allen. And the contest will be such that, who knows what will happen. In all of that dust clearing, Ed Lee's death presented the opportunity for some interesting things, as I said in San Francisco, and that is a mayor's race. With Newsom gone, and with Newsom having participated in elevating Ed Lee back in 2011, he actually did us the great favor. After Diane and Newsom, Ed Lee was the beneficiary, as Diane was, not of an assassination, But Newsom waited patiently long enough, not getting sworn in, for Ed Lee to get 6 votes of the supervisors. David Chu was the senior person holding the job of acting mayor for about 3 minutes. The job went to my friend Ed Lee. Ed Lee dies. London Breed, black woman, elevated instantly. A fellow named Aaron Peskin, one of the smartest people I've ever met, started to try to figure out how, in this town, the progressives have been trying for years to win the mayorship. They can never win the mayorship. They can't win citywide on anything. And so they are constantly altering the electoral process. They go to what they call ranked choice voting because they can't win heads up in many of the districts. They go to district elections because they can't do anything citywide. At one time, all supervisors was elected citywide, and you always had great quality because people who lived out in the Sunset had their person representing them equally as interested in what happens in North Beach and in all the other communities of San Francisco. It was a wonderful system to have 11 supervisors, all citywide, and a mayor, and a district attorney, and a public defender. It was a good system. Well, they changed it because they couldn't ever win. They could never win. They won one time with Agnos, and I think he became a progressive. I don't think he was originally a progressive, but that was the way the deal went down. They're still trying to get there. Peskin saw the opportunity on Ed Lee's death. Actually, I think he saw the opportunity on the very night that Ed Lee died. He started trying to program. They could only get to 5. They couldn't get to 6. And it would take somebody who normally would be for London Breed coming over to give them the 6th vote. And that actually happened. A fellow named Mark Farrell, who was the description of the criticism of London Breed's job and of London Breed as a person. One member of the Board of Supervisors excoriated her for being under the thumb of billionaire money people and then promptly elected a billionaire money person to replace her. Typical in the inconsistencies in the progressive movement in this town, but that actually happened. And lo and behold, now we have a fellow named Mark Leno. Now Leno had been really smart. At the time, Ed Lee made it very clear that he would have to exit in 19. He would not try to change the law, as some mayors have done across the country, and give them one more term. Bloomberg spent $120 million to get one more term, and they suspended the term limits in New York and gave Bloomberg one more term. Well, they won't do the same thing here, but Ed Lee, no, he wouldn't do it. He would exit appropriately. Mark Leno immediately, following the pattern of Newsom, started a long time ago, raised $420,000, had everybody under the sun. Everybody he'd say hello to, he'd put them on his list as endorsing him. Well, and of course you don't raise any question about that because you don't really see it. But he did that. And lo and behold, Ed Lee dies. You got Mark Leno, the only person with money already raised for purposes of running for mayor. However, his bank account said 2019. Well, they had a relationship with the Ethics Commission in San Francisco, and the Ethics Commission, being a flexible Ethics Commission, immediately said 2019 doesn't mean anything. You can move that to just say mayor. You know, eliminate the bank account that says 19, which gives him $420,000 instantly. Well, the newspapers, including my column, talked about how that meant in a short election, which occurs on June 5th this year for the special election, you got to raise a lot of money quickly. If you're going to start in January for a June election and you can only get $500 a person, you really got to go out of your way to do the job that needs to be done to raise that money. So Mark Leno appeared to be starting ahead of everybody. London Breed, in 21 days from the time she announced till the end of January, raised $320,000. So suddenly, here's this woman who was dumped by her colleagues on a movement by one of her colleagues, a movement he should not have made. She ends up now being the money competitor for Mark Leno. Suddenly, the people who have been talking about Leno's formidable strength in fundraising realized that if she could raise 320 in 21 or 22 days, she probably could exceed him in 30 or 40 days, and certainly she did. And believe me, the reference to money is going right out the window. Nobody is discussing candidates' money except Angela Alioto's. She can't seem to get started. And it's 35 days left, and she's still trying to get started. But that's not unusual for Angela. She's been the candidate several times anyway. And the results are certain that each one of the candidates are fully funded, including Jane Kim on the person. But on this ranked choice voting, it's really going to be a challenge to figure out who can win this thing. I'm of the opinion that Breed will win it, because suddenly the people who are out in the sunset and part of the city will not, in my opinion, embrace on any one of the candidates that are on the progressive side. Leno and Kim are running as a team. They're saying vote, since you have 3 votes, they're saying vote 1-2 or 2-1. And between the two of us, one of us ought to win. Angela is out by herself. She should get votes from the sunset. London Breed has made an effort to get votes from the sunset. London Breed has made an effort to get votes from the Chinese community, in particular from the Asian community in general, but specifically from the Chinese community, because she's got the most important Chinese elected officials and the most important Chinese names on her behalf campaigning for her. Katie Fang, who is a member of the Board of Supervisors, Carmen Chu, who is the assessor recorder for the city, David Chu, who is a member of the California State Assembly, they're all for London Breed. And so suddenly, a combination of the Chinese vote, the conservative vote going for a black woman from the Fillmore, and the business of the women's votes, since Mark Leno so offended women generally when he ran against a woman who was a state senator, that he had managed to get her to get me to appoint him. In that process, he decided, when she had a little trouble running into bridges and things while driving, he decided to run against her, and the results were that Carol Mignon ended up losing the election, and she lost it to, of all people, Mark Leno. Well, that didn't set well. As of today, she's for London Breed, and so is Roberta Achtenberg, and so is a whole host of the women's movement in this town, all for London Breed, because of various flaws in both Jane Kim and in Mark Leno. I think a combination of all those things may very well be able to overcome the fact that London Breed is running as a solo. My good friend, Ms. Alioto, didn't have the good sense to embrace her. She's simply still figuring she can win without hooking up with anybody. The two of the people are running together. That's always a challenge, but in my opinion, the risk thoughts are going to be London Breed will be the next mayor of San Francisco, and in that capacity, she will be instantly identified nationally as a figure to be reckoned with in the world of politics, and it'll be one of the things that Democrats nationally will look to when they think about trying to undo Trump. Bernie Sanders, of course, is talking about coming here on behalf of Jane Kim, but then again, that Bernie Sanders movement has pretty much run its course. Bernie Sanders movement didn't have the good sense to immediately become a part of the youngsters' movements on the gun actions. They tried, but they didn't get there. Didn't have the good sense to become part of many of the other independent efforts that's being made by the Me Too operations, and it didn't have an opportunity, apparently a good judgment, to embrace any of those. And so suddenly Bernie Sanders is on the ropes in every sense of the word. He realized earlier on that he didn't have much going on with black people, and so when they went down to memorialize the Martin Luther King assassination in Memphis several weeks ago, Bernie Sanders showed up down there and then took a tour of black part of the South, all with an effort to change his image. And while he was doing that, somebody went up to Vermont to see what the impression is in that state, and they were going to go to the black barbershop. They could only find one black barbershop in the whole state of Vermont. That's the sum total of what you get with Bernie Sanders, I suspect. And so suddenly, London Breed is going to become, in my opinion, in spite of the Sanders movement and the progressives, a formidable figure. And we will have then the following collection of people. Diane will win re-election. Kamala is already there. Newsom wins the governorship. Garcetti has the mayorship of Los Angeles. Breed has the mayorship of San Francisco. It is just going to be an incredible force, particularly when Nancy Pelosi becomes the speaker. You're talking about a whole new world, all tilted by what we in California do for the rest of the nation on the Democratic side of the aisle. Finally, however, let me tell you, if Trump pulls this thing off with the man who runs North Korea, we are going to be profoundly disappointed because he will get the Nobel Prize. Thank you. On the other hand, you talked about the number of automobiles on our streets. The state of California decided to allow Uber, Lyft, and a few other organizations of that nature, plus an organization called Chariot that runs a competitive transit service on high volume locations to exist with a state authorization and zero control with the city. And our city fathers and mothers did not step up to the plate and challenge that. They spoke up about it, but they didn't challenge it. And as a result of that, you have a whole host of people, probably 1.5 out of every car you see out there fits the category of what I just described, and they're using the streets without any authority, without any control, what have you. And we have a police department that has decided, for whatever reason, that they're not going to, really go after people for dropping people off anywhere, for doing all kinds of crazy things with their cars. We don't restrict the streets in any fashion. For an example, Market Street, at one time, from I think 8th Street or 10th Street to 1st Street, was going to bar private automobiles. We did that for about a minute, and we didn't follow through with that. We've been talking about traffic congestion management. We haven't done anything about that. And believe me, I literally am now being forced to walk to work every day, and because I can't get here during the course of the day if I try to take a cab. And there are fewer and fewer cabs because the business of charging $250,000 for a medallion and the medallion isn't worth it because the cab driver last night told me that he'd been driving for 11 hours and he had grossed $125 and his gate was 70 or 80 bucks. So he's making less than minimum wage driving a cab because of the competition from all these outlaw and bandit operators using the streets in which they're using the streets. I also saw and had a client come in who had gone from 25th and Fulton to somewhere downtown during the time that Outside Lands were having a concert, and one of the bandit operators had charged him $100 or so because they get what they call surge pricing. Whereas a crowd, you pay surge pricing. And then I went up to visit a client whose case I lost up at San Quentin. And I swear to you, I saw a recruiter for drivers standing at the gate. I don't know which one of the companies, but they were. And you didn't have to have any knowledge of the streets of San Francisco because they told you right out that don't worry about it, we'll take care of it. You don't have any money for a car? We got a dealer, we'll let you have a car. We'll collect from him for you and all that kind of thing. So we're not doing what we need to do what we're talking about letting people get away with using needles on the streets. We're talking about, now we're aggressively trying to stop people from breaking in cars and all those kinds of things. This city is so terribly unpoliced and misdirected at the moment. I'm hoping that if my candidate, London Breed, wins, she will begin to redirect the city as it was when I served as mayor.
So therefore, what grade would you give Mark Farrell thus far?
Mark Farrell is an interesting study because he has the benefit of the five. He got all five of the progressives on the board, including one who was running for mayor, Jane Kim. And then he won't even take their calls currently, apparently, because his conduct is that of a real mayor. He's really trying to do the job that the mayor should do. He's speaking up when that fire occurred in North Beach and there was a dispute between Aaron Peskin and the fire department and the fire chief. He came down on the side of the fire chief, challenging his benefactor. Peskin had been his real benefactor in getting the job. He clearly made it clear that as the mayor, it's his fire chief, and he's backing his fire chief, and he's backing his fire department. That was the first public confrontation. And there have been multiple confrontations since then, including his true view on homelessness. He has been one of the conservative members of the Board of Supervisors who have been pushing for increased restrictions on the use of the streets and the occupancy of the streets by homeless people. He is following through on that aggressively. He's also doing all kinds of symbolic things that mayors do regularly. And it almost appears as if he's running, except he can't run this time. He could run in 19, so maybe he's thinking that opportunity may present itself, but he's doing what a mayor should do at this moment.
You mentioned Supervisor Peskin and that incident and that fire in North Beach. What was he doing there anyway, trying to tell the fire department how to handle the situation?
Well, it's the district in which he represents. That's where the fire was. And according to Peskin's account of it, he was trying to make sure that North Beach didn't go in a blaze. All those buildings are made of wood. They're all right next to each other. It's almost like it was 1906. And he claims that he was more than concerned that that might be the fate if there was not aggressive enforcement of the efforts to save North Beach. He didn't realize initially that you can't fight the fire until you're sure there's nobody in the building, because you gotta rescue the people in the building first. He was apparently unaware of that, and it caused him to react differently than he would have reacted had he known that. That's according to him.
But one more question about local politics. Is there a successor to Rose Pack, or was she just one of a kind that we'll never see again?
One of a kind. There may be ultimately somebody who will come along at a time and place, but Rose Pack was unique. She understood early on, when the rest of us didn't, that you need to draw a line around the community you want to save. She made sure the city did not even allow the redevelopment people to visit Chinatown, let alone touch any building in Chinatown. She utilized all of the slow down methods by which to stop development from occurring, and she used that to stop the alleyways from being changed. So Chinatown is the way Chinatown has been forever, and it must be credited to Rose Pack. Then she realized that she needed to go beyond to ensure that that would always be, and she became as influential in every other district in this. And when the district elections came down, the progressives didn't realize they set it up perfectly for her, because suddenly the Chinese were living all over San Francisco, not just in Chinatown. And Rose Pak knew exactly how to make it appear as if that vote in each one of those districts was the decided vote. And that extracted responses politically. She elevated the level of representation on the appointed side. She persuaded many of the Chinese to take the civil service exams and get qualified. And now inside of government, Rose Pak had better access than she had to go Hoover had with the FBI in the years in which he was running the FBI. So when you ask if there's anybody know, you have to go a long time to be able to, every day, know something operationally about every unit of government through somebody that speaks only your language.
All right, thank you. Let's move on to state politics. The Democratic Party controls the legislature and the major executive offices throughout the state. California is becoming essentially a one-party state. Is that good for California?
There's nothing wrong with being a one-party state. After all, the Republicans in this state kind of caused that. They first put in place something called term limits, which is what caused me to have to leave Sacramento. I would still be in Sacramento. I didn't realize how wonderful it was to be mayor, and I never would have realized it, because I wouldn't even thought about being here full-time. But they put in term limits in 1990, and in 1992, we all had to figure out, go do something else. And then the Republicans didn't allow that to be the only thing. They somehow decided that there had to be a way in which to change who people could vote for at whatever stage. And they put in place no longer parties' choices in the primary, but they put in place the top two vote getters in the primary. Every step that they've taken has harmed their efforts. And until somebody gets charged with a Republican operation that understands how not to die, they won't be able to change. On the other hand, as Democrats, we can't seem to fully understand and appreciate how powerful we could really be if we would really do the things that our party stood for at one time, when Phil Burton was alive and when people like that was really, Pat Brown was really kind of running the party. That was great times, and great things were done by Democrats in those years. Now we are where the leadership of the party and the people in the legislature are ex-staffers. And they were usually ex-staffers who couldn't find a job in the private sector. So you're talking about people who are not yet grown up to the stature that you really need to have to offer great leadership. I'm hopeful at some point we do get there. Newsom's election may move that agenda in that direction, because clearly Kamala Harris being the U.S. Senator, the junior senator from California, and Diane claims she's not going to run again after she wins this time, and she will win this time. There are 3 or 4 other people running. Alex Padilla is running as Secretary of State. We've got a strong bench on statewide office candidates. There's Betty Yee is running the controller side, and she's going to win again. We got some good people who are coming up, and the names I gave you earlier about who would be the mayors, et cetera. All those are good things. And so the Democratic Party has a chance in the foreseeable future really to become of age, and the state of California will be the leader, or could be the leader, of the Democratic Party nationally, particularly if we figure out how to go down south and begin to elect and help elect people like some of us have been trying to do in the various city elections. We got a black woman now who's the mayor of Atlanta, Georgia. We got a black woman that originated right here in Oakland, sworn in this week as the mayor of New Orleans. And somebody, Ed Lee, raised money for it here. And so there's some of us that are really trying to program California to have great influence on other states by way of the electoral process and the support process. And that'll build California into being the place to go if you want to go national.
Thank you. There are a few questions regarding the gubernatorial candidates. And let me summarize one or two. You've spoken about Gavin Newsom as almost it's a given. Does the mayor of LA, former mayor of LA, have any opportunity, especially considering the fact he's gotten some seven-figure gifts recently?
Well, the seven-figure gifts you're talking about is Reed Hastings from Netflix provided $7 million for Antonio Virgioso, and Eli Grove from Los Angeles, a civic cultural person who was very interested in education on the charter school side, provided another $1.5 million. However, in the polls, Antonio, in order to get to the second spot, has got to hop over two people, and there's 35 days left to do that. There's no way I would predict that any amount of money you want to spend couldn't get you there. After all, I remember somebody named Mae Whitman that spent more money trying to get close to Jerry Brown, and it looked like it was counterproductive. Every dollar she spent, she became perceived as worse. And so at some point, money doesn't make and can't make a difference. In Antonio's case, that might be his reality, because he would have to get over the two Republicans. If he's got to get over two Republicans, he's got to become more Republican than they are in order to get over them. That means he's got to be caught dating Stormy Daniels. I don't think his wife will tolerate that. So he's got the issue to get there. And in my opinion, he won't get there, no matter how much money is spent.
Okay, thank you. One more question about state politics. I asked you this question last year and asked you what grade you'd give Jerry Brown. I think at that time you said incomplete. So you have a different opinion right now.
Well, you know, Jerry is the leader of all politicians in the state of California. He's the leader of the two U.S. senators. He's the leader of the Democratic majority from California in the Congress. He's the leader of both houses of the legislature. He dominates where he wishes on the city side. Not so much San Francisco, because the progressives don't like him at all. And he has not made a lot of friends with the non-progressives. Although he lives here now, I think. Spends more time here than ever. Every other place in the state, Jerry is pretty much in charge, and he has apparently decided that he is going to fix it so that things that he wants to happen, even though he will no longer be the governor, will happen. He's trying to start the ditch digging for the two tunnels, and he wants the rail to go forward, and he's putting that. He is doing a international climate control summit sometimes in September. Here he is suing the Trump administration on the question of some aspects of environmental issues, and he has presented himself as a national spokesperson on many of the things that Democrats generally care about and that people really need. And so I would tell you, and he would tell you, that his work is not yet completed. And even when he's no longer the governor, I think he would tell you the work is not yet completed. That's why you need to find another job for him. All
right, let's move on to the Donald. I personally find him to be a moral midget. But why should we really care about Stormy Daniels? I mean, we know that Jack Kennedy had a series of involvements or affairs. Lyndon Johnson, same kind of situation. Other presidents have been accused of or have had that kind of a background. In your column, you mentioned that certainly this is the first time in history where a president was involved with a porn star, but it happened much before he was ever running for office. Gavin Newsom certainly doesn't have a stellar career. His ex-wife is a host for Fox. That should put him out of the running almost. And he's had some other difficulties. I mean, why should we care about Stormy Daniels?
I don't think the public, the voting public, ultimately places any credence in the allegation that having an affair disqualifies you, unless you utilize the system to facilitate your having an affair. Like, for example, you turned over the trust, the city money, to the porn star. They'd be a little mad about that. But if it was your money and it was a porn star, it wouldn't bother them at all, and it's the same. And that's why Trump can't be touched. And it's clear that he can't be touched because much of what people have talked about vis-a-vis his relationships, been married 3 times, and during the course of the campaign for the presidency, much of what people talked about and they knew about happened, and they still voted for him. And as the pundits so reported, when asked, the Trumpites act as if they never even heard of it, even though they are the family values folk, allegedly, and it doesn't seem to bother them at all. And I'm of the opinion that if all we have against the candidate is that kind of allegation and not something really substantive, we aren't going to change anybody's mind unless our candidate on the substantive side is so much better.
Okay. You mentioned the fact that none of the Democratic candidates seem to be ready. That was a label put on Barack Obama in the year just before he got the nomination. How do you feel about that? Do you really believe that none of these people are ready?
Well, I don't think it's a misdescription, but the public is sometimes fascinated with certain kinds of things about people. They were fascinated with our governor, Ronald Reagan, and 1966, they embraced Ronald Reagan over Pat Brown for governor, and they were fascinated with this guy that had made the speech for Goldwater. They became fascinated with Barack Obama like they'd never been fascinated with anybody else, and didn't have a whole lot to do with whether or not he knew how to run government, because obviously he didn't he didn't do the kind of things that Johnson did. He didn't do the kind of things that Eisenhower did. He didn't do the kind of things that Truman did. He didn't do the kind of things that Roosevelt did. And so it's not so much whether or not you're projected to do it. If you're fascinated, and people became really fascinated with Obama, like I've never seen at any other time. And Obama utilized electronic communications better. He was like a pioneer of using electronic communications to enhance that. People, some of my people that I know around town that can't afford a cup of coffee was sending Obama $25 a month in order to get him elected, and asking for nothing in return. And that's a phenom. And he enjoyed 2 terms and left the Democratic Party in disarray because he did not prepare a successor. He did not prepare the party to be operational. He did not prepare the party to harness resources so that it can be, the party is broke. Obama left the party broke. Clinton, when she came along, pulled together all of the things that she and her husband had done over the 20 or 30 years that they had been part of the operation, but there was nobody that did the party. And the results were that we are kind of at a loss, period. And I'm telling you that if a phenom comes out, let's say that Steph Curry decided he's going to run, and they win Friday, and he stays afloat because he seems to be so delicate on the floor. A Steph Curry, though, could be a new trend. Or, you know, Colbert decides he's going to run. That could be a place where we could ultimately go. So somebody coming out of nowhere with different credentials unrelated to holding public office, and it's now proved. Trump proves you really don't have to have any talent at doing the job. You get it? You have to have talent in other ways, but you don't have to know anything about the job, and you really don't have to learn anything about the job. And you don't have to hire anybody that knows anything about it.
Yeah, I think those of us who have been listening to this evening could keep this going for another hour, but unfortunately, we've reached the point in our program where it's totally time for one last question. NFL teams have started playing football in Europe. When you had your last big birthday, it was celebrated in Paris. Your next big birthday is coming up soon, and I would hope you'd celebrate that one in Paris as well. But at the same time, perhaps we could do this when you're in Paris celebrating your birthday, and we could have the first Willie Brown International Commonwealth Club. What do you think of that?
Well, you know, the Commonwealth Club is really cheap. They have never paid. So there can be no hope. Richard Rubin and George Dobbins and all those people, I mean, they watch the money of the Commonwealth Club. I'd hate to have them part of me in government. So, going abroad, we got to get a new sponsor.